Swizzle stick. Swizzle stick.
Peace, friends.
Peace, Mikhail.
My name is Mikhail White. I am the pastor here at the South Lansing campus of Sycamore Creek Church. Joining me this morning is Lou Worthington. Everybody say hello to Lou. Lou, you are leading a small group for the first time at Sycamore Creek.
Yeah.
But this isn't the first time you've done something like that.
No.
No.
I have done that a lot, and I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing a little plug here, doing a deep dive into the Bible.
Nice. That'll be fun. It'll be good. Look for that in our groups and events catalog. Just 1 minute.
Are we doing nursery?
No, we're not doing nursery today.
Okay, I've got one couple. Y'all tell them no.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So, I have a shout-out question for you this morning. Would you rather read the book or watch the movie of a great story? Shout it out. Yes. Okay. Lots of you are saying read. I think the people who would rather watch a movie maybe are shy to say that, which is understandable. I think it really depends on the story for me. Nathan says movie.
Movie?
Own it. Okay. We have a couple of songs to sing this morning. Would you stand with me and let's sing together?
Did everybody enjoy the cooler weather this week? Wasn't that great? I feel like it was a little preseason preview of what we've got coming. And I'm here for it. I like the cooler mornings. So this next song, I think everybody knows and maybe have sung a lot. One of the beautiful things about life and our experience and this God that we get the privilege to know and love is that things can be new. Things can be different. I feel like God is always inviting us to a new perspective and a new way to see things. Every day the sun comes up. Every day it goes down. But every day is new. And I think that's awesome. I hope you guys will enjoy this, hopefully, a little bit different rendition of 10,000 Reasons. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. Sorry, I'm in not the right key. We'll try that again. That's better. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, for Thank you for singing this morning. You guys can have a seat.
So typically, this is when we would dismiss kids to Kids Creek, but during the month of August, we're having family worship Sundays, which means there's no Kids Creek, there's no nursery. But what we do have is a science experiment for the kiddos. So I've got 5 set up over here. Come on up, stand here. I'll be with you in just a moment. Don't touch anything, please. Don't touch anything, please. I'm watching you. I'll be there in just a moment. And we have, oh, James is coming. I was going to say we have 1 extra, so we have 5 set up. So, okay, so you should have gotten a program when you came in. In that program is your connection card. Go ahead and pull that out. Write your name on it. If you are new here, if you're a first-time guest, share whatever information you feel comfortable sharing, or update it if any information has changed. And we'll give you some more information on what to do with that in a little bit.
But they're not just for first-time people.
Yes, everyone should be filling it out. Yeah, that's right. All right. Then pull out your cell phones. It's time for selfies. Selfies. Lou, hi. Okay, I'm going to go over there and take one with them. You can post it to your social media with the hashtag SCCMI. This week's selfie of the week is Aaron and Tamara. Okay, here guys. Scooch in. Okay. I'm trying to stand in a place I won't get feedback. Okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. Lou is gonna help me light these candles. There we go, there we go. I'm gonna get another one. Yes. Oh! We're doing it. We're professionals. Okay, so after we light these candles are sitting in plates of water. There's water on the plate. This is, yes. You hope it dyes the plate. What do you think is, so we're gonna take these glasses and put them on top of the candles.
Oh, I think I know.
What do you, wait. What do you think is gonna happen when we do that?
I think it's gonna suck up the water. I have no idea.
What do you think it's gonna do?
I don't know either.
You don't know?
I'm with Anya.
You're with Anya. Okay, so turn the cup over and place it on the plate on top of the thing. You guys can't see it very well, what's happening here. But the water is coming up. There we go, there we go. And then when it burns out, the water goes up a little bit more. So there's like an inch, half an inch of water in each of them. So
I knew it.
you knew it.
I think I've seen this.
You've seen this in an Instagram video? Yeah. Yeah.
Seen my dad do it.
You've seen your dad do it. Okay, we can leave this here.
Wait, Jesus did that.
Okay, you can pick it up if you want. It's not like it's gonna do anything.
What?
This
Yeah,
splashy?
is it
It's just food coloring and water.
wait, I hope it dyes the plate.
You want it to dye the plate? These are our dinner plates.
I know.
All right. Thanks, kids. We've enjoyed these, right? Yep. All right. Thank you, James. All right. So this week we are continuing our series on theology and science as part of where we had a science experiment this morning. And this morning we have 3 campuses. We have 3 pastors. There's me. Pastor Mark is at Potterville, Pastor Tom is at Eastwood, and occasionally we have the opportunity to hear from them in our services through video. So today's message is a conversation between Pastor Tom and Pastor Mark on the origins of humanity. And one of the things that we do is that we'll pause throughout our message to have a chat question, so don't be surprised when they look to the camera and they say, hey, here's a chat question for you. So our message this morning begins with this.
Anyone who is bilingual knows that you can speak 2 different languages and say the same basic thing. Each language adds nuance and layers of meaning to the other. Science and faith are two languages that can work together to say the same thing and add a depth of our understanding and experience of God. In this 4-week series, we'll work toward becoming bilingual with our faith and science languages. In the end, we'll experience a richness in speaking both.
Tom, you asked me to answer some questions today that you have about human origins.
I sure did.
I think you asked me because of my background. I have my PhD in cell molecular biology. I was a breast cancer researcher at Michigan State. I left all that behind to become a pastor, but I'm still a scientist, and I love getting into this stuff.
You're the Reverend Doctor.
I have a whole pile of like documents that I brought with me today.
It's like you've been studying for a test.
It feels like I've been studying for a test. But before we get into how I do on the exam here, the test, let's start with going back to Scripture, going to Genesis 1, looking at the creation account, where everything came from. That's going to kind of be our starting off point for today. So we're going to kind of back and forth start with reading this poetic account in Genesis 1 of our origins. So beginning in Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters.
Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. Then he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. And evening passed, and morning came, marking the first day.
Yeah, so each day God speaks and creation happens. It's this very poetic account of the creation story in Genesis chapter 1.
Each day, 6 24-hour days, right?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Don't jump the gun yet, Tom. So for 6 days, God creates by speaking, and then the 7th day, God rests, and that's where we kind of continue the story in Genesis 2. Will you continue there for us?
Yep. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work.
And God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation.
This is the account of the creation of the heavens and the earth.
So then there's a second creation account in Genesis 2. So that we wrapped up the first creation. There's a second one, and that second one begins this way. When the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, neither wild plants nor grains were growing on the earth. For the Lord God had not yet sent rain to water the earth, and there were no people to cultivate the soil. Instead, springs came up from the ground and watered all the land. Then the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground. He breathed the breath of life into the man's nostrils, and the man became a living person. Then the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he placed the man he had made. Tom, we started with Genesis 1 and 2 because that's going to be the foundation of everything we talk about today. And we're going to get into some tricky territory here.
Okay.
Trying to bring together what Genesis says with what we can learn from science. It's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving, so to speak. And
I see what you did there.
You see what I did there, yes. It's going to be tricky. So I wanted us to start today with Genesis 1 and 2 and what we all agree on. And here's what all Christians agree on. All Christians agree that Genesis tells us about our origins and affirm that God is the creator and sustainer of all life.
Amen.
So that's our basis.
Okay.
From there, we're going to have fun the rest of the time here. But first, I'm going to be answering the question today, like, where does life come from? Where do humans come from? And we want to give people an opportunity to discuss that themselves.
Sounds good.
Here's our first question for discussion. If someone asked you, where do humans come from? How would you answer that question? Let's take a moment and talk about that.
right. Well, Lou, I thought we'd start with asking you, like, you know some things about science. Can you share a little bit about, like, your background in science?
Yeah, so my first 20 years of life were really dedicated toward becoming either a mathematician or a physicist.
Okay.
And so my first grad school experience was doing quantum theory, actually.
Okay.
And so that's where I was when God called me into ministry.
So you are also a Reverend Doctor.
Yes.
Okay. So if someone asked you how God created everything, how would you answer that?
Don't know. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a science question, really.
Sure.
And so the how it happened, and I don't really think Genesis is intended to explain that.
Right.
But I think it tries to talk about the why question.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's like two different questions, like why are we here? And then how are we here? And Genesis is asking more the why and maybe even the who, like who's behind it all, but not how it happened.
Yeah.
So that's also, I think, how I would answer that question. Like, well, that's a science question, and I'm not a scientist, so.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's great that we both have our scientists and people of faith have their areas of inquiry and investigation, and they're not excluding the other.
Right, right. By the way, I forgot to mention that we do have kids' activity bags, but as you can see, sometimes they're for adults as well, and I know that I pay a little bit better attention when I have something to fidget with. So feel free. They're at the Kids Creek check-in in the back. I just make rectangular prisms. So anyways, let's continue on with the next segment of our message.
So, Mark, this message today fits in a bigger series that we're in called God Speaks Science, and we are exploring how science and faith intersect together. And
which I'm so excited about.
Yeah,
this is my topic.
Reverend Doctor, right there.
Yes.
And I'm a social scientist by training, as a psychologist in the background, or psychology, and what we're learning through this series is that the bilingual nature of speaking science and speaking faith can say the same thing and add nuance to how you understand, well, in this case today, where humans came from.
So as we get into that, I'm curious, Tom, you're going to be asking me some questions because you're curious. What did you kind of grow up hearing about how humans came to be? Like what maybe is part of your background?
Yeah.
Regarding that.
Well, I think I grew up in a literal 6-day creationist kind of space, but it wasn't a hardcore, like we didn't talk about it that much, but it was understood that the beginning of the Bible said that, so we should take it literally. Yeah. And I think it was also kind of understood that when you encountered evolution in your science classes at school, that the faithful thing to do was to challenge the teacher. I actually was just talking with somebody recently who said that they were literally given scripts by their faith community for how, or like talking points for how to challenge evolution in the classroom.
Okay, so that's one view of how humans came into be. It's what I would call the traditional de novo view.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
De novo.
Yes, that's D-E-N-O-V-O, de novo.
That's Latin, right?
It is.
Okay.
And it's basically that there was nothing, there was dirt, and then somehow we don't know how, like God maybe had like these cosmic hands or something that like formed human beings. And it's part of this view that creation occurred over 6 days that were 24-hour periods, and it was maybe 6,000-ish years ago. So prior to Adam and Eve, there were no human beings. You start with this pair of human beings, Adam and Eve, and that's how you have all the people that we see today all over the globe. Yep. And that's sort of what you...
Yeah, I think it kind of, as you're talking about the mechanics of it, I don't know that we ever got into that, but it was, you kind of imagine God as a potter, and there's clay, and God is literally forming like limbs and so on, and it's like a clay pot, and then God blows into it, and somehow miraculously the clay becomes a human being?
We're going to get to science more, but let's start with just some like theological concerns about what I just said. And one of the biggest ones is, we read Genesis 1 and 2. We have Adam and Eve, and we know Adam and Eve had kids, Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
And Cain gets very angry with Abel.
Yeah.
Kills Abel.
Okay.
And after killing Abel, Cain is very concerned. And let me read what Genesis 4 says. Anyone who finds me will kill me. And he's worried about anyone killing. Who is anyone? Where did anyone come from?
Yeah.
Who are these people that we don't know? Like Scripture doesn't tell us. But it's a great question. Cain and Abel also were married. Who did they marry? Did they marry their sister?
Their sisters.
Again, the Bible doesn't tell us. We don't know. But one of the things I think we can take from this is maybe Adam and Eve, maybe Cain and Abel weren't the only beings that are human.
Yeah.
Whatever human means, and we'll get to that too, because how do you define human is part of the challenge in this conversation.
It's kind of like maybe the Bible's only telling a little bit of the story and not the whole of the story. Like just the story of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, but there's other stories perhaps going on besides their family story.
Absolutely. And when we begin to think that way, that maybe Adam and Eve weren't the only two human beings, and who is Cain and Abel? Like, who are they concerned? Who are they marrying? Who are they like having kids with? Maybe there's some other possibilities, and that's what gets us to genetics.
Okay.
And beginning to talk about
now we're
genetics.
into modern science.
Now we're into modern science. Now, I'm not a geneticist, so I'm gonna do my best to tell you about the stacks of research that I looked up. The challenge too is not all of genetic science addresses theological questions or the questions that we're trying to answer today. And so to some extent, there's the genetic science, and then there's what we're concerned about in terms of the origins of Adam and Eve, and they don't perfectly match up.
Okay.
And so the other caveat I have to give when we get into genetic science is that there aren't clear answers. And so, if you have some questions and you're like, Mark, I really want to get the exact answer today, we probably won't get there.
Yeah.
But
spoken like a true academic. Like,
well, yeah, you gotta be accurate.
Yeah, you can only say what you know, and you have to be real clear that outside of that, I don't know.
So let me just tell you a little bit about genetic science. I'm not going to go into all the analysis that we can do, but if you think of DNA, and our DNA is amazing. One of the things you need to do in order to have another human being is you need to replicate DNA. It's a cornerstone of life. And
back to my high school biology class.
Our replication process is amazing. So DNA is this double helix, right? It consists of 4 different bases that are paired together. They need to reproduce each other with really high accuracy. So our bodies can do that. On average, our bodies make 1 mistake per 75 million base pairs.
Wow.
Which is just amazing. I mean, it's the equivalent of, you can imagine, like I hand you a copy of the Bible and say, Tom, I want you to type this out on a word, on your keyboard, and we'll keep track of how many mistakes you make as you go through copying it. Guaranteed, you're going to make some mistakes, right? You're not going to get every single letter right.
I mean, give me a sentence to type, and I'm going to make a mistake, let alone the entire Bible.
Let alone the whole thing. And so, similar to how we have technology now that allows us to look at manuscripts and see whether someone plagiarized, because we can recognize portions of other manuscripts, we can do the same thing with DNA.
Okay.
And we can look at the genome, the whole of our DNA, and we can look for pieces of DNA that are similar between different people, between different organisms, and we can track the changes that happen, the mistakes that are made over time.
Okay, so you're talking now, you're like putting biology. I asked you to do this because you may not be a geneticist, but you're going to understand the science a lot better than I will.
Yes.
And the real question I was wanting to dig down into was, is it possible genetically for humanity to go all the way back to just 2 people? And we got to get into a little bit of high school biology, which it's all coming back.
Yep.
So was it Watson and Crick? Are those the people that created? Or
they figured out
the double helix. Yeah.
They didn't do it on their own. It was a collaborative endeavor, and they built on the previous work of a lot of people.
There you go. Yeah. We're back to your first message, that science is collaborative. But you have taken it into something that I do know, which is textual criticism. And in textual criticism, you can go back and say, oh, from this text, we get this variant of this sentence or this word because some monk forgot to add a vowel in there, or that's the benign explanation. Some monk decided to change the meaning of this because surely the Bible can't say that, and then you get another variation, and you can trace those all back to original manuscript at that point that was then altered and changed. You're saying DNA is the same way?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the neat thing about DNA, because we know about generation times and mutation rates, again, that one mistake per 75 million, it's almost like having a genetic clock.
Okay.
And so once you have a clock, you can extrapolate forward in time, but you can also extrapolate backward in time. And what we can do is looking at the human population today and the amount of variation that we see genetically in our population. There's billions of humans, and we can see how much difference there is between the different humans. It suggests that the original population of human beings was about 15 to 20,000.
Okay.
Now that's not two.
Yeah.
And so genetically, genetic science tells us that we could not have arisen from two people who were created de novo out of nothing and then gave rise to all human beings.
Okay.
That's the basic conclusion of genetic science. And I've given you one small piece of evidence, the mutation rate over time, the error rate over time, and the sort of genetic clock. There are multiple pieces of evidence for that I'm not going to get into because they're too hard to explain to the average person.
Yeah. I got kind of stuck though on being able to predict forward. So can you tell me how long it is before we have wings?
No, I can't. Sorry.
Darn it.
No, this is the mutation rate. It's not where it will go. That's determined partly by environment, right? And that's part of the idea of evolution, which is that there are these changes over time. They're based on the pressures that organisms face, and who knows? It's possible. Our climate is changing. Maybe at some point that's going to produce changes in our world and the different organisms that inhabit our world. I would say that's probably even likely, but what that will look like, I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade.
Okay.
It didn't come up in all my research to figure that one out.
Yeah. I feel like right now is a good time to pause for people to begin to digest this. So let's go back to the chat and let's just take a breather here. What have you heard about genetics, and maybe you've heard it here or maybe you know otherwise, about the challenges to going back to just two people genetically? Talk about it.
I feel like you have more thoughts on this than I do.
I've got a lot of thoughts and very few words. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I've heard about genetics and the challenges of going back to two people genetically, I've mostly heard here. I mean, like, I'm kind of aware generally that would be difficult, but like why that's difficult or what proof we have of that is not something that I've taken a lot of time to think about.
Yeah, I really wanted to look at the research that Mark looked into. We
should have on our link tree, so like on our QR code, a copy of his resources. So if other people share that same desire, you can go and check that out.
Yeah, and it's, I think anybody's guess whether, I mean, evolutionary theory says that each mutation that stays is an improvement, otherwise it would not have stayed.
Right.
The problem for cancer people is that cancer usually is a disease of old age, and only things that are passed on to children when you are of childbearing years are the things that really get passed on.
Right.
So I tried to do my part and have a child when I was quite old, right, Caleb? Just trying to contribute to the future of humanity.
Yeah, of course. All right, well, let's continue on with our message and see where we go from here.
All right, so Mark, what I understand where we've been so far is that we now have the tools, the scientific tools, to look back genetically on the genetic history of humanity and see where the mutations are and where the changes in diversity is. And that brings us back to, I think you said 15 to 20,000 original humans, not two. Did I hear that right?
You did hear that right.
Okay, all right.
And this is where time also becomes an important thing, because in order to see what we see today, the genetic clock has to go back about 200, 300,000 years ago.
Okay.
To get to where we are today.
Yeah.
So we've got two pieces of important information, the genetic clock sort of giving us a timeline, and then the original population necessary to see what we see today. It's about 15 to 20,000. Now, importantly, geneticists can trace where people have moved throughout history, and it looks like civilization people originated in Africa. And from there, they migrated throughout the whole world. But you can particularly see, like, when people got to the Middle East area, there's sort of like a bottleneck. And again, you can trace like small groups of people going from one area to another and then see that genetic history.
Yeah. Again, I think about the textual criticism idea, where you can see a book was copied, or the Bible was copied from a certain monastery, and then that traveled to another monastery where it picked up another variation, and traveled to another monastery where it picked up again another variation, and you can track all of that. But now we can do that scientifically with DNA.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's the stuff that scientists are able to track and predict is amazing. I mentioned you can go back in time. One of the neat things is we're now able to extract DNA from ancient remains.
Yeah.
And so we can go back like 50,000 years, 100,000 years. We can predict what we would expect to find in the DNA, and then we can actually see it in the DNA from these older human remains.
That's where it gets really powerful, when a scientific theory is predicting something's going to be there, and you go look at it and you find it. And you're like, okay, this is really solid.
It's really exciting. I mentioned before that one of the organizations I really like and support is BioLogos. And BioLogos has a lot of geneticists who have been working on this question that we're addressing today. And I want to take a moment and just read their statement that they came out with recently. This just came out within the past 2 years and sort of summarizes what we've been talking about in terms of genetics. So they say, modern Homo sapiens, that's you and me, humans, we first appeared in Africa about 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. All the genetic evidence to date says that the average breeding population of our ancestors has been larger than a single couple, again, not just Adam and Eve, for at least the last 200,000 years. And there's no plausible model affirming a single unique pair of genetic progenitors, that's people who gave rise to everything else, less than 500,000 years ago. And that also accounts for the data that we see in the genes of all the people who are alive today. So the genetic findings do not preclude a historic view of Adam and Eve, since they could have been two individuals within a larger group. Now, I'm going to use that to move us. So there could be two individuals, Adam and Eve, who are part of a larger population. And that kind of brings us back to Genesis 4 and some of that stuff.
So maybe telling just their story, but not everybody's story.
But not everybody's story. And one way that could work scientifically is through genealogical science. So we've been talking up till now about genetic science.
Okay.
It's looking at these our genes, the stretches of DNA. Mm-hmm. Genealogical science is something different.
Okay. They sound really similar, though.
They do, don't they?
Yeah.
So genealogy, you have to think more like your family tree. Mm-hmm. And if you think about your family tree, there's genetics involved, yes. But really, what's important in genealogy is like, who is a son? Who is a daughter? Mm-hmm. Who is an aunt? Who is an uncle? Like what are the relationships that happen between people? And when we think about genealogy, I have two kids. Each of my kids has roughly 50% of my DNA in them.
Yeah.
The other 50% comes from Jana. Now, it's not perfect, but it's 50%-ish. Yeah. If my kids then have kids, the 50% of me that was in my kids, 25-ish% is going to get passed.
Okay, so it's going to get halved every generation.
Now, if you think of genealogical science, what happens pretty quickly with genetics is that as you go from generation to generation, the amount of your DNA that's passed on to someone, it goes down. And so pretty quickly, within 10, 15, 20 generations, hardly any DNA is left from the original person who started the family, so to speak.
So you're still in the genealogical line.
Yes.
But you have almost no genetic material shaved. You have almost no genetic material shared with your genealogical ancestors.
Exactly.
This is mind-blowing. And you sent me a podcast that I listened to exploring this, that it really was mind-blowing to me to think about this.
So what is suggested by genealogical science is that we don't have to go back that far to find a universal genetic ancestor.
Okay.
And what this means is it's someone who can somehow be tied genealogically into every single human being that's alive today. And genealogical science has analyzed this. They've looked at the generations from one to the next and how you trace genealogy, and even accounting for that there's some really isolated parts of the world where hardly anyone interacts. You really only need one person who comes in or out of that population to tie it in genealogically with all the other human beings. And so we can actually show genealogically that it's possible there could have been two people as little as 6,000 years ago who gave rise to every single human being that's alive today, which is pretty mind-blowing. Okay. And I mention this because BioLogos had to change their statement a year or two ago because of the genealogical science and what was being presented. And it's just a reminder that science changes on things. Now, what this means, though, is that there had to be a larger population of people. There you go back to the genetics.
15 to 20,000, you said.
Yes, 200 to 300,000 years ago. But genealogically, you could have two human beings. Maybe they were just born naturally. Maybe God actually made them from the dirt. We don't know. They need to be able to interbreed with the people who are around them. Clearly, we know Cain and Abel had wives.
They had wives.
Did that with someone else. It's one possible theory now where we're able to bring together genetics and genealogy stuff along with what we know to be true in the Bible.
And this is if you're trying to synthesize this idea of us still somehow all coming from two people, Adam and Eve, but just genealogically, but maybe not genetically.
Exactly.
That's all under a theory that Pastor Mikkel talked about in a previous message on original sin, which was one of three theories that we really do have this kind of literal connection to two people. But that still leaves open a door for that these are just two symbolic people. They didn't necessarily exist. You could just read Genesis 1 and 2 more metaphorically as symbolic people for all of humans, you, me, everybody who's watching this.
And one of the ways we can get at sort of a symbolic interpretation of Genesis is if we look carefully at the original Hebrew, the way that the word Adam is used, it shifts in Genesis from a more general use to a more proper name use.
Yes.
And that's where, like,
now we're talking what I know.
You and I both know, right? Like, we know Hebrew, so we know that Adam is the word for human. And
it's a play on the word for ground. So if we really translated it originally, it would be like, and God created the groundling or the earthling or something like that.
Exactly.
But then you're right. Like, eventually, groundling becomes the proper name, but it's only when you have a second one that comes into being alongside of the groundling.
Yes.
And Adam then becomes his name.
So part of what scientists try to do, and they're working now with theologians to do, is to create models. And a model is where you take the data that you have and you try to, the way I might say it in church circles, is you make a story. And it's a story that takes into account the information that we have. And one of the models right now for how did human beings come into being is that there is something special about us now. This is called the Homo divinus model.
Okay.
So we're back into there's some sort
Latin.
of spark within us that is divine.
Okay.
Like, there's something of God. It's not our genes. It's not our DNA. There's something there, though, that makes us different and able to have a relationship with God. And that there are these two people, Adam and Eve, who are the first to experience that.
Okay.
That they experienced it somewhere in the ancient Near East. Could have been 6,000 years ago based on genealogical science. Could have been 200, 300,000 years ago based on genetics. We don't know. But there could have been two literal actual people who then gave rise to everyone who is alive today. And they had a special relationship with God. Now, one of the things that Mikkel sort of touched on is sin and where sin enters the world.
Yeah.
And with this idea, you would have these two people who God created to have a special relationship. And I say created, again, we're talking about how that would have happened, but a special relationship with God. And somehow they turned away from God and what God had instructed them, what God had intended for them, and that is sin. And ever since then, that relationship with God has been fractured by this turning away from God that we practice. Now, there's lots of different models for sin, lots of different ways for explaining it. This is just one example of how we could think about it. And from there, God has continued to reach out to people to seek to have that relationship that God initially had with these two human representatives, Adam and Eve. The important part of putting Adam and Eve in the Middle East is we know that eventually God had a special relationship with the Jewish people. And so while the origin of Homo sapiens might point to Africa, somehow when we merge that with our faith, we know that God had this special relationship with the Jewish people who were settled in the Middle East. And so somehow we need to make that leap from Africa to how do we view people in the Middle East. And that's where we get Adam and Eve possibly being the originators in the Middle East, giving rise eventually to Abraham and the Jewish people.
I think right now is another good time to stop and let people catch their breath, because you've been studying this. I mean, you've been geeking out with your doctor side of your identity, but not everybody's there. So let's stop. And I think what we want to invite you to do is to reflect on what is the difference between a genealogical understanding of Adam and Eve versus a genetic understanding of Adam and Eve. What does that do for your sense of reading the Bible and understanding who you are and who we all are? Let's talk about it.
Okay, so just to level with you all, I've watched that twice and I still don't totally understand it. Well, I still don't understand it. I'm going to take out totally. I don't understand it. But there was some pieces of it that were related. They mentioned this to what we talked about last week and the different theories on original sin, and there was recent representatives, ancient ancestor representatives, and symbolic. Those are the three different kind of understandings of Adam and Eve. And so, Tom and Mark were talking about one model of that, where Adam and Eve could be two literal people 6,000 years ago who then affected all of our genealogies.
Yeah, that's interesting, but yet something to be said for the symbolic is the very use of what they were talking about, that Adam, the word for man, or Adamah from the ground, seems to really underscore that symbolic nature of language in the story that is in Genesis.
Yeah, I mean, what we were kind of talking about is like, this is all super interesting, and for me, it's not essential to my understanding of what Genesis is trying to do, how I understand the genre of Genesis, to be like the story, like, it's like how we tell our children about where we came from. Is sort of what Genesis is doing, those first like 11 chapters of Genesis. And so for me, I feel like, okay, well, this is helpful that it's there. And I'm also okay that I don't understand it. But if you're like, I really want to know, like the podcast is going to be on that, like the sheet, the list of resources that Mark is sharing. So if you're like, I really want to understand more about this and wrap my head around it, there's going to be resources there. Cool. All right, so we have one more segment. Let's continue on with our message.
All right, Mark, so I asked you to answer this basic question for me. Does science support us coming from two human beings? And you have said science does not support us coming from two human beings when it comes to genetics.
Correct.
But it could support coming from two human beings when we think about genealogy.
Yes.
Am I catching your answer correctly here?
You are.
Summarizing it up.
And that's as part of a larger population that somehow exists. And I think the last thing we need to touch on here in terms of science is evolution, and evolution as a theory as part of this. And one of the things that either of these two genetic or genealogical options presents is that over time, there has been change in our world, there has been death in our world, and that death is a natural part of our world and the processes that we see around us. The big thing, I think, for us spiritually is that there was a spiritual death when Adam and Eve turned from God. And that spiritual death is that disconnection from God that we groan under. And there again is where all Christians agree that somehow we need salvation from that. We need healing. We need freedom. We need forgiveness. And there is something wrong going all the way back to the Genesis account where we need to be saved. Yeah. And that points us to Jesus. And I want to land where all Christians agree. And where all Christians agree is that God is the creator and sustainer of all life, and that we need Jesus. We need this God in the flesh, God taking on, being as baby, born of a woman, who lived a perfect life, who taught and performed miracles and healed and then gave his life for us and was placed in a tomb, but then was raised from the dead. Like, yes, all this origin stuff and where does humans come from, it's important, but we don't want it to distract us from Jesus.
Yeah, I think in some way, although I think it's helpful, you did a message at one point about the word theory in science versus theory in the layperson's definition of that. And in the layperson, theory is like something that's not proved, and it's might be wrong, it might whatever. It's more like hypothesis in the scientific world. But in the scientific world, theory is a pretty solidly founded thing. belief structure or system or framing. But in some sense, all of this is theoretical because it goes back either 6,000, 200, 300,000 years ago. None of us were there. But what we all know is that when we read the Genesis story, it strikes true to us because it's our story. Because all of us have experienced some disconnect from the God of love and doing the loving and just thing in our world. And we all need God to come back and save us from that situation that we've gotten ourselves into, both communally and individually.
Absolutely.
Is that where we end?
I think that's where we end.
You've done a lot of work to get to this, your whole life, like down into one point of answering some questions for me about science and faith.
Yes, and we didn't cover all of my research today.
Okay.
And so, we're going to provide a link at each campus through our link tree where people can check out some of these resources. I summarized this much of a much broader conversation that's happening both in science and in theology.
Yeah. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this with me today.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
All right.
All right, well, take a deep breath. I'm really thankful to have people like Pastor Mark and Pastor Tom on our staff to share that kind of stuff. That's not a message, that's not expertise that I have that I could bring to you. So I'm thankful for Pastor Mark being able to share that with us. Now, we would love to connect with you. We think that maybe you'd like to connect with us. So pull that connection card back out, flip it over. You should already have put your name and your information on the front. Flip it over. We've got some next steps that you can take a look at. It's more like I'm interested in doing this, or I kind of want to commit to that, or like internally. You're not like signing up for stuff. You're just, for instance, saying, I'm going to worship with you next week at Eastwood, or I'm interested in more information on the conference or on Pastor and Pub. We'll get to what those are. And then below that, there's a space here where you can share prayer requests. We have a prayer care team that every week takes time to pray for the requests that come in. They often will reach out and just like with a note of encouragement. And then when you finish filling that out, just drop that in the blue bucket at the end of your row.
That is cool. Yeah, the prayer team is pretty amazing.
They're pretty
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Pastor in a Pub this week on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Arts Pub.
At Arts Pub.
And if you're a first-time person to that, you can get a freebie from the pastor.
Yep, I'll buy you a drink.
The most expensive thing on the menu?
Well, a drink.
Like a real big one?
And it doesn't have to be alcohol if that's not your jam. There's all kinds of different things at Arts Pub. They actually have really good breakfast pizza. If you've never had it, they have really, really good breakfast pizza. So you can always come and just get like breakfast for the rest of your week when you get a breakfast pizza. So you should do that. All right, so next week we will be, don't come to this building on Sunday morning. It will be sad and lonely and dark because no one will be here. We are going to be at Eastwood for our Sunday service next week. And afterward, there is going to be a pizza lunch. Bring a side dish to share, but pizza will be provided. And there's going to be a presentation from the Justice League of Greater Lansing. They're a community group that we partner with, and it will be a chance for you to hear more from them about who they are. And then in just a couple of weeks, less than a month now, we've got the Ignite Leadership Conference coming up. This is the first time we're doing a conference like this. It's internal, so you all are getting this, it's just for you. And we've got Carrie Lattiser coming. She's a friend of mine. She's amazing. She's the executive director of the Post-Evangelical Collective, and she'll be sharing some messages with us. It's also really, really practical stuff. On Saturday, we've got workshops. So we'll hear from the small group leader training will happen on Saturday afternoon, and Kids Creek volunteer training will happen. So all the stuff that you would typically have an annual meeting for, it will be there. And so it'll be encouraging and also
lovely
equipping. Also, it's free, so you can't really, can't beat that, honestly.
Good.
Honestly.
Cool. Teen Fuel tonight, archery tag. I think I'd be really good at that because in track in high school, I was a javelin catcher.
Oh. I don't know what that means, but that's cool.
No, I wasn't. But, and it's going to be at a home here in Lansing. It's Charlie's house. And if
Charlie's
you
house.
need to know, you can talk to Pastor about that.
Yep.
Sounds like fun.
And don't worry, precautions will be taken. Nobody will be losing any eyeballs today.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. We have a few different ways that you can give. You can scan this QR code. You can go online. You can drop your envelope in the blue bucket. However you choose to give, we're really thankful for your giving. It helps make the mission happen here at Sycamore Creek, and we're celebrating today what your giving has done. Last week we had a small gathering of like Teen Fuel age people from South Lansing. One of our other Teen Fuel volunteers, Eric, and I had like a game night with the kids and had pizza, and it was just a chance for them to get to know each other and hang out and have some fun. And some of those games were actually donated from like a small group this summer. So thank you for your giving. We have one more shout out question for you. The weather is starting to change, or at least it was earlier this week. Today it doesn't feel like that. Are you excited for cool weather or sad to see summer go?
Sad.
Sad. Huh? Excited. It seems like a good split. I feel split down the middle myself. I'm like, I don't know. It's nice, but also I love the sun. It's going to be sad.
So.
Yeah. We have a couple more songs to sing this morning, so stand with us as you're able and let's sing together.
As you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so will I can see your heart in everything you made. Every pain inside a signal fire of grace. Creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty your voice. But once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. It all reveals your nature, so will I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. Creation still obeys you, so will So will stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. If the sum of all our praises still falls shine, salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failures and pride. On a hill you created, light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. As you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I. I can see your heart a billion different ways. Every precious one, the child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I. Like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
So good. The fun thing about God and science is that there is still so much room for mystery. And I appreciate that about God, not being a scientist myself. We're going to end with a super fun song called All Yours, because at the end of the day, it's all God's anyway. So join us in this last one to celebrate.
The boundaries for the oceans, you command the wind and waves. Standing over every season, God, you reign. It's all yours, the day and the night, the earth and the sky. God, it's all yours. Every breath we're taking in, just hold on again, worship. God, you walk in our beginning. You instructed all our days. all yours. Every breath we're taking in, we pour out again in worship. And it's all yours, day and the night, the earth and the sky. God, it's all yours. Every breath we're taking in, we pour out again in worship. God, it's all yours, it's all yours.
Sometimes I can't believe how lucky we are to have a band like this full of volunteers. Would you join me in thanking God for them? Thank you so much for joining us this week. Next week, as a reminder, we will not be here. We are going to be at Eastwood, and yes, we're going to be at Eastwood. You know what? My watch is ringing on me anyways. I was a little distracted there for just a moment. And so next week, we're going to be at Eastwood. We have lunch afterwards. We're starting a new series called Jesus Alternative Plan. It's a series on the Sermon on the Mount. You're not going to want to miss it. And so here is our series opener as a way to give you a preview of what's to come. And until next week, be curious, be creative, and be compassionate, and go in peace.
We know everything today and believe almost nothing. Jesus' most well-known teaching, the Sermon on the Mount, doesn't just reform our world, it recreates our world, using not just words and concepts, but living images that grab your soul. Join Sycamore Creek as we spend 5 weeks living into the Sermon on the Mount using Richard Rohr's book, Jesus' Alternative Plan. Alongside the series, you're invited to join a small group reading Jesus' words yourself. You'll find that it is not what you know that matters or changes anything. It is what you believe, and believe all the way through.
Earth and the
Bye.